Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement. I'm Joe. And this is my basement. So, this week in Joe's Basement, I invite you to join me on a personal odyssey I made back to my own high school, where I entered a teenager and exited a teenager, about 4 years older. So what I did is I went to Kenwood Academy in Hyde Park, and what I decided to do was to go back there to try to interview some of my old teachers, see what they're really like as like people, like peers, you know, now that we're all adults, and it's okay now. Well, I went to the principal's office and secured permission from Mr. Parker, who was ultimately quite helpful, actually. Because last time I tried to film in Kenwood, I was a student there, and I just cut all my class, and I got blamed for a bomb scare. And that's a long story, but anyway, nothing like that happened this time. But I got free reign, man, with the camera, and these cable access cameras, I gotta say, they are very aesthetically pleasing, because everybody thinks that you're from a real TV station. Little do they know. Anyway, so managing to fend off the hordes of teenagers who badly wanted to be on TV, regardless of whether or not they had anything to say. Managed to interview a few teachers and attempt at least to get a look at the personal side of teaching and discipline of high school students, and hopefully we'll provide a few insights for you outside of the sort of dusty platitudes which are recycled by PBS and the network news stations and stuff, and you know, see what these people are really like behind the facades of the authority figure. Man, I just saw Twin Peaks, last episode of Twin Peaks. What a pisser. David, you prick. You complete prick. I can't believe you're going to leave us hanging the whole summer, but I'm telling you, he was wearing a bulletproof vest. I'm pretty sure that Dan pointed that out, because, I mean, you can't have the series without Kyle. Come on. Audrey and her father, I mean, that's just cheap. That's just not good. All right, so, education and discipline and authority figures this week in Joe's Basement.
The first week I was here teaching, there was there's a hall guard out here. There's an older black lady that sits out, and her job is she's a hall monitor. That's what she does, and she just so happens to have like the worst spot in the school.
Right by the lunchroom?
Yeah, right by the lunchroom, you know, so that's where like all the little rambunctious kids run around and stuff, you know. And so she always has a hard time getting them out of the hallway. And, you know, I mean, they have all the little rules, like don't wear your hat and stuff like that. You know, she take your hat off and stuff. And I was coming through one day, and apparently she had told some little boy to take his hat off, and he wouldn't. You know, and so she took it off of his head, you know. And so him and his boy, like, had grabbed onto the hat, you know. And, you know, and she was like, let the hat go. No, you let my hat go. And so when I came up, he was, bitch, you better let go of my hat, bitch, I'll hit you in your motherfucking mouth, you know, and all that stuff, right? So, I mean, I was bad. I mean, you know, I was not a model student when I was here. My grades were pretty decent. And I got along with most of the teachers, but I mean, I was bad. I used to go out and, you know, drink and stuff like that between classes and stuff. You know, I'd cut and stuff like that. So, I mean, I wasn't a model student or anything. But except for, like, the one incident where I, like, teed off on the teacher, I mean, I was never, like, belligerent and, like, totally disrespectful and threatened teachers and all this stuff, you know. So this, like, blew my mind. Whoa, you know. And I got, like, all incensed and stuff. And later on, Mr. Denton thought it was really funny, you know, because he was like, haha, it's really different on the other side, isn't it? But I tell you one thing that I learned from that experience, though, you know, I came over there and I was like, the other thing was I was very upset that he was doing this to this older female, you know. I mean, at least the way I see it, it's like, I mean, they deserve a certain modicum of respect simply because they're older and they're female, you know. And I wouldn't expect him to do that to me, you know, and I'm damn near his age, you know. I certainly didn't expect him to do it to her.
Take him on if necessary, right?
Right, yeah, right. I could beat him up, you know. And basically it got to the point, I came over there and I was like, you know, what's the deal? Why are you doing this, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're supposed to take your hat off. Why are you yelling at her? Let go of the hat, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, he's approached me the same way he approached her, you know. And not to being a professional teacher, you know, I was like, man, I'll whoop your ass, boy, you know. And then Mr. Denton came floating past and like handled it, you know, very professionally and like an adult. He was just like, what's the problem? Oh, that's the problem. Let's go. You know, and took him down to the office and the guy got suspended, you know. And, you know, if nothing else, I learned the lesson that, well, okay, now that I'm a teacher, I guess I have to have a certain air of adulthood and professionalism, you know. And I guess you know, telling the guy that I was going to like bounce his head off of the wall was not exactly the most adult and professional way to handle that situation.
God, I don't know why I decided to become a teacher, besides the fact that I was in college. I was a TA, teaching assistant for a couple chemistry professors. I knew there were a lot of job openings in teaching. I knew that if I didn't like it, I would have my summers to try and experience other things. And I love chemistry. I love working in lab. I like reading the textbooks. It sounds crazy. I never thought I would like reading a textbook, but I do enjoy that. And it just sort of happened. I think the fact that I am younger makes it easier for me to communicate, in the sense that I listen to almost the same music. And not that I, you know, sing in class or anything like that, but, you know, sometimes if the kid gets the right answer, I high five, you know, great answer, high five. And
you do that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes I go wild, you know, you just get up on the table and, you know, you're trying to make a point, no one's listening, you just stand up on the table. I've done that before. What else have I done? I don't know. You get up there and it's like, you know, being on stage every day, and the adrenaline starts going, and sometimes I don't even know what I'm going to do, you know.
After a while, you develop your own style, your own technique of teaching, how to relate to kids. Biggest problem for young teachers starting out is knowing how to work one-on-one, how to sit with kids, how to be willing to, I should say, how to be willing to help them, be there when they need them, trust the children, not be their friend. I think a teacher cannot be a friend. They can be sort of a surrogate parent, but not buddy-buddy, because once they become buddy-buddy, then the child tends to take advantage.
Did you ever try that? You ever wanted to be buddy-buddy and it didn't work out?
No, no. There are some teachers, I feel, that try to look for that spirit of being a friend of the student. And to me, it doesn't work. I mean, some teachers are preoccupied, I think, with the idea of being popular. It doesn't matter. I mean, we're not here to be popular. Everyone likes to be popular. No one wants to be disliked, all right? But my philosophy, which I learned the hard way, the idea is that you have to be firm and fair at the same time. That's the best philosophy. Be tough, but at the same time, be reasonable. I mean, there are some faculty members that go to the extreme. They're too tough. They're not they don't bend, all right? This is the standard, this is the rule, this is what you have to do, no exceptions. And the kids get turned off, and probably rightfully so, because they feel they can't get through to the instructor.
I think I've become more compassionate. Early on, I wasn't willing to feel for the student per se. Now, through the years of teaching, I understand that people do have problems that regardless of how much I expect them to come into my class and do things, I realize that there are students in this school that have problems that far outweigh having the correct gym uniform and whatnot. And if they come to me, and if in any way I can help them overcome these problems along with staying in school trying to pass the class, then I feel that that's the biggest thing for me.
And then they come to you rather than their other teachers?
Sometimes I tend to think, no, it's not just me per se. I attend students, in a lot of instances, teachers are father figures, whether we want to be or not. There are students that will identify with me, whereas they won't identify with another teacher. I tend to think it's a teacher's role that I was taught this years ago, that sometimes effective teaching takes place outside of the classroom.
Before your time, we used to have a kid who used to jump on my back as I walked out of class and rode me out of class. You know, stuff like that.
Why do you do that?
Well, you know, it's not that he was a bad kid. It's just that he was very hyper. And when kids do that, certain kids, you know, they're very playful with you and stuff like that. It's because they're trying to get your attention. They're, you know, they have a lot of personal problems or whatever, and you just, again, you learn to deal with the kid. Not all kids are going to react in, you know, in the same way or whatever. And with this certain kid, yeah, he was a problem child, but yet sometimes you know, he did sit there and he would learn something, but his attention span was very short. So
what was his story? Why was his attention span so short? Well, you say it was a problem child.
You can tell that you know, the home life was a sort of place where a lot of times he got more attention in school than he did at home, and I think that he was trying to, you know, again, receive the attention from certain teachers and you know, teachers he liked and stuff like that. As far as writing up the kid every day, having him suspended or whatever, that's not the answer for a kid like that.
What do you think about? What do you do when you have to discipline kids? Do you like that? How do you deal with that?
No, it's a waste of my time. Simply.
Some just decide from the very beginning, at least that's how I perceive it, that they're just not going to make it easy for you. Everything's going to be a battle. No matter what you do, they're going to make it a war. And some kids don't give much respect at all. But that's a very few, and it doesn't take many to drive you crazy. But the hardest thing is not teaching, it's discipline. How to keep 28 kids doing one thing without it just sort of fizzling apart on the ends. And
what do you do to keep them from fizzling apart at the ends?
oh, I've eventually set up rules, you know. You can't go to the bathroom during class. You go before you come to class. If you forgot your books, your notebooks, or your homework assignments, you cannot go to your lockers to get it. You've just got to either get it after class and look in with someone else and get a piece of paper, take your notes. I make sure that they have a notebook, and I look for it once every quarter, and I look through their notebook and make sure they've been taking notes and look at their folders and make sure they're keeping their homework assignments. And little tricks like that have helped a lot, I think, and I think the kids appreciate it too.
I think, you know, one of the things is once you have control of your class setting or however you structure it, that's pretty much how it works, and it's not too difficult from that point. I don't find it any more difficult. My requirement is my kids have to jog out and be out there before I am. They know if they're not out there before I am, they're late. So if you see me out there and you see my kids running to get ahead of me, that's because that's the rule. And they're pretty good about it.
Basically, you can tell that when they come into class, you know, they want to socialize with their friends. They haven't seen them for a couple periods, and that, and they want to tell them basically what happened, you know, 2 periods before or whatever. And if you structure it where you come into class, you take attendance, and then you say class is now beginning, they would all, supposedly, they will, you know, get you, you know, you'll get their attention, and then class will begin. But again, you have to really make it where, you know, they understand that class has now started, and therefore they better pay attention. Yeah. But again, you know, it comes with time, and if they respect you in, you know, in a certain way.
It's kind of weird being on the other side, you know. Though I've swore that I would not hassle kids for stuff that I used to do.
Like what? Like passing notes maybe or something like that?
Yeah, like passing notes in class. I mean, usually I don't really get on them for talking in class unless they're talking loud enough that it's disturbing me, you know. If I have trouble hearing myself, or I think other people are having trouble hearing me or whatever, then I have to be like, well, you know, look, man, you know, if you're gonna talk, then whisper over in the corner somewhere, you know.
What's that like, though, that now that you're on the other end? I mean, do you now sympathize more with what your teachers used to do, that used to hate?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really different perspective. I mean, still some teachers just get really carried away with the whole, you know, attitude of like, I've got to be in control, I've got to be in control. I mean, to a certain extent, you do. You know, I had a girl in one class that cursed me out. You know.
What was that like?
Well, she was ticked off because I had marked an answer to a question on an exam wrong, and she was convinced that it was right, and I said, well, no, it's wrong, you know. But a lot of people had answered it the same way, so I gave half credit, you know, because I figured, well, if so many people are answering the question wrong, then it's probably my fault, so I shouldn't give them no credit for it, you know. So I gave them like half credit for the wrong answer, even though it was wrong. And so she figured that she should have full credit. And I was like, no, absolutely not. You're not going to have full credit. And she was very ticked off. And it got to the point where I was like, look, you know, throwing a tantrum is not going to get you full credit. It's wrong, and I'm not going to give you full credit. So she was like, fuck you then, you know. What? Shut up. You know, she walked out, right? Now, I had actually done that to a teacher before when I was here.
Wow.
I had gotten in an altercation with a teacher where I thought the teacher was completely wrong and was dumping on me and the whole thing. And so, you know, I called her a bitch and, you know, and blah, 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 and never went back to her class, and she failed me. But, see, and that's what I mean about the perspective being different. Okay, my perspective then was that, you know, she's just being an ass, you know, and somebody really needs to tell her, you know, that she's being an ass, you know, and I don't need this class to graduate, you know. And now my perspective as a teacher was, well, it really didn't tick me off that much that she had cursed at me, but it would set a bad precedent in the class if I let her get away with it, you know. You see how, you know, so the attitude totally changes.
I don't personally feel that students are any worse of a discipline problem on the average than they ever were. You know, that's, but I think maybe in the halls and running around the school, there's more kids running around the school and in the halls than there used to be.
What do you think about the role of the systems that are set up to control that, the forms to be reinstated to classes, the IDs in the hallways and the guards, and the strict time limit and time between classes and things like that?
Well, I don't think it's completely effective. I mean, it works to some degree. One of the problems around here is we're not always consistent about that. Like earlier in the year, we made a real effort in the fall. We had a lot of what's so-called sweeps. The principal would get on the loudspeakers and would tell everybody, you know, we're going to have a sweep and close your doors and don't let anybody in. And teachers would, hall guard teachers and security people would herd students to a spot and they'd be given detention, study, or at least held there for the rest of the period. That cleared out the halls.
But you see, tardiness seems like a mild sort of misbehavior, but I thought that...
It is, and yet they're trying to stem the problem of tardiness. Therefore, I just try to follow the rules of the school. Okay, as far as sending someone out of the class, very seldom, no, because they don't want you to send someone out of the class. And of course, I am very much a follower of rules and regulations. You know, if they say you do this, I might not always do it, but I certainly try to do it.
So the teachers don't have to look at a full absence bulletin. This tells them who is supposed to be absent, so they don't have to bother doing that. Makes filling out cut reports a lot easier. And those are cut lists. The stacks there, those are all cut lists that were entered into the computer.
That's a fascinating large pile.
Yeah, 500 cuts a day.
That's one day's cuts?
No, well, that's the cuts for the entire school year.
Ah, okay.
Those are lists for the entire school year going back to September. Now, what I'm going to be setting about here, I don't know if you filmed earlier the students that were brought in for discipline. They were brought in for various discipline offenses, persistent cutting and tardiness of ICE class.
What's ICE?
It's a work program class. Another student was assigned suspension for repeated insubordination to his study teacher. And another student here was assigned in-school suspension for repeated disruption of his division class. Every time a student is suspended, there's about 20 minutes work involved. And this school year so far, there have been 883 suspensions. So they keep us kind of busy down here.
I'm not sure that any procedure can work completely satisfactorily in this area. One of the problems is if you make it difficult for kids to come into class, you're just going to, A, discourage some of them and give others of them an excuse not to come. In other words, if you say you can't come back to class until you've got this reinstatement and that reinstatement, or I've talked to your parent, all this stuff, you're never going to get it done. And the kid will just wander around, which is even worse. So most of us let him in. I do anyway.
He was disrespectful. I told him to sit down. He told me to shut up. I even gave him a second chance, and he continued to react in the same way. These gentlemen are just recording here. There's no need to know who we're talking about. See, now, the particular young man in question, after we suspended him and I called to leave a message for his parent, he was given a pass and instructed to go on to, in this case, on his program, lunch. You see he's still hanging around over here. So if he's going to be disrespectful to the school rules when the person who's doing the discipline is suspending him, you can imagine what he must be like for his study teacher. So that's it. It's a job that can be satisfying and be rewarding in some ways when you have parents and teachers that thank you for helping them out with problems and informing them about their sons or daughters' problems. But other times it can be irritating. I don't lose my temper very often, though. Getting back to this is, I have to sign on here.
But how do you feel about these students that you're dealing with? Like, there's a gentleman that's still
Well,
still here.
there's a drawback to that is that in this particular capacity that I'm in, you see all the students with problems. You see all the ones that have attendance problems or discipline problems. You don't see the best students. So from that standpoint, it can be kind of frustrating. I know every kid in the school that has a problem of one kind or another, but the only way I'll see the good kids is if I go to the Honor Society tea or graduation.
You think they're really bad kids, the kids that come in here?
I didn't say bad, I say kids with problems of various kinds.
Fair enough.
And sometimes the problems stem from problems at home, and sometimes it's just problems that the kids have developed themselves. And there's all kinds of avenues of resource where we try to help them out. I mean, for repeated cases, you ask the parents to come to school, you ask them to meet with the counselors, you ask them to meet with the assistant principals. And unfortunately, you're not always successful in turning the kid around.
Because sometimes kids take kindness for weakness, all right? If you feel that, if a kid feels that you're not tough, I mean, that you're willing to go along with them, they feel, okay, I'll take advantage. Sort of like a bully in a classroom, all right? Supposing I was sitting behind you in a classroom and I didn't like you, and supposing I just started to bother you, all right, in different ways, and you didn't do anything about it. And as long as you didn't do anything about it, you know, I would continue doing stuff to annoy you. And then perhaps one day I say, okay, well, Mike, I've had enough of your fooling around. I'm going to put a stop to this. And at that point I'd say, okay, he finally stood up. You know, he finally showed some backbone. And I think that's the key. When the teacher shows the student that he's the boss, all right, that's the important thing. Teacher must show the kid that he is the boss, and then the kid will respect. It's all boils down to the idea of respect, and then once you have that, you have the cooperation. If there's no respect, then you don't get cooperation.
Kids do want structure. They want it in the home and they want it here.
I think they want more discipline.
As far as discipline is concerned, I think that in many respects they're crying out for help. And yes, they want someone to notice them and they want someone to help them. As far as the school system able to do that, I don't really think so. Right now, the school system has taken on the role of parent, has taken on the role of everything to this kid, social worker, parent. We help them when they're sick. You know, we tell them to go home. You know, but actually they want to stay here rather than go home in many respects.
Earlier in here, we saw you dealing with these guys and I guess giving some suspensions to the guys, and it looked like sort of like a tragedy. Like they were clearly pretty humiliated by the thing, and
yeah, well, of course, their fate had already been decided when they came in here. Yeah. The assistant principal made a decision on the suspension. They'd already given them a hearing. So our role is just to carry out the due process. Yeah. I can certainly have feelings of empathy for these kids that they can't get along with this teacher or that teacher, but it's part of their responsibility as they're growing up to learn to deal with everything. And if they're failing, all we can do is try to help the school to correct them. That's it.
Yeah.
When I was in school, I was a perfect student. I never acted out, never caused teacher a problem, made all good grades. And maybe that's why I went into education, because I had a good rapport with my teachers, and I liked all the teachers that I had when I was in high school and even grammar school. And that's probably why I went into education to begin with, because I liked being around the learning process.
When I took over the program for the week that I took it over, I had all these warnings about this one guy named Jimmy, you know. Oh God, that's the Mr. Parker teaches Jimmy. Oh, I feel so bad for you. He's crazy. The little boy is crazy. You're gonna have so many problems with him and stuff, right? And it was really an interesting experience, because he didn't come to class for like the first 2 days, and then he came to class, right? And he showed up, and even the little kids were like, and even little kids in the class were like, that's Jimmy, man. That's Jimmy. You're gonna have problems, you know. And I came into class and he was sitting there, you know. He was like leaning back in his chair and he was like counting all his money, you know. And so, you know, I walked in and I was like, "Hey, are you Jimmy?" And you know, and I guess the way it was explained to me, everybody had this idea of Jimmy as being kind of psychopathic, you know. And he was just this really psychopathic little boy, you know. You just kind of had to put up with him the best you could. And I think Jimmy had been caught up in that whole idea that everybody thought he was psychopathic, so that was the way he was supposed to be, you know. And so, you know, I said, "Hey, are you Jimmy?" And he jumped up and walked up to me like, "What? What'd you say to me?" You know. And once again, being young, being a male, you know, I was incensed once again, and I was like, "Hey, boy, I'm not your friend. I'm not your boy. You know, you better talk to me like you got some sense, you know." And he was like, you know. But after that, I mean, we were really cool. I mean, I see him now, even though I don't have this program, I see him now in the hallway, and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Simpkins, what's up?" I sat down and I talked to him, and I was like, "Well, you know, Jim, they told me that you were nuts, man, and that, you know, even the kids were like, you know, Mr. Parker, like, can, like, you know, barely get along in class when you're there, you know." And he said, "Oh, well," you know, I was like, "So how come, you know, you act so cool with me? You know, you do your work and, you know, you participate in class and you're nice and everything." And he was like, "Well, man, because I hate Mr. Parker. So I give him a hard time on purpose." You know, I was, "Really?" I mean, all the administrators and people in school think this kid is nuts, you know. I mean, he does act kind of weird sometimes.
What does he do that's like so nuts?
I don't know, he just acts like, he came in, I was in the teacher's room here, you know, grading some papers or something, and he saw me and he came in. And he sat down, and so, you know, I was like, "Hey, Jimmy, what's going on, blah, blah, blah." And then one of the other teachers is in here, right? And he was like, "Well, you know, this is the teacher's room. The kids are not supposed to be in here, you know." And I was like, "Okay, Jimmy, you got to go," you know. And, you know, as he was leaving, you know, he was looking at Mr. Colette as he was leaving, and he went, "Rah, rah, rah." You know, and Mr. Colette was like, "What's the matter with this kid?" You know. So, I mean, he does little weird stuff, but the kid is not nuts, you know. He just kind of acts silly sometimes, you know.
I want to feel me. Do you feel how lovers go on the Kenwood?